Several comments were made in Parliament today regarding the recently issued international sovereign bonds. The comments revealed that the ISBs were issued at higher interest rates when compared with several other countries.
It is the officials of the central bank who can help Sri Lanka get back on track. Recently, Sri Lanka received $3 billion US. We are happy that our country received this. However, we must note that our country has been misguided in such situations. Bonds with a maturity period of 10 years have been issued at an interest rate of 7.85%. During the same period, Malaysia had issued bonds at 3.87%, Thailand at 2.51%, Vietnam at 4.87%, Greece at 3.84% and Botswana at 5.27%. Sri Lanka was able to issue the same quantity of bond interest rate 5 years ago. As a cabinet minister, will you submit information regarding the central bank's decision to issue such a large quantity of treasury bonds at an interest rate of 7.85%? This is why I said the central bank has made certain decisions that goes against the development of our country. When we make such statements, they make hasty decisions. We must repay our loans along with its interest. The debt burden may include loans which were obtained by the present government. Despite the IMF's existence, policies are implemented by Sri Lankans. The international community only advises us on how to take the country forward. No, you must not speak of matters you are not aware of. The former president is aware in this regard. The sinful debts that were obtained during your government is what we are paying now. International sovereign bonds worth $1 billion and $1.4 billion with maturity periods of 5 years and 10 years respectively were issued recently. During the past week, Vietnam had also issued ISBs at an interest rate of 4.78%, while Thailand and Greece had issued ISBs at 2.51% and 3.84% respectively. The central bank and the present government had issued a 5-year maturing ISB at an interest rate of 6.85%. The $1.4 billion ISB maturing in 10 years has been issued at an interest rate of 7.81%. What's the purpose of establishing a government? The government must forecast crises that the country may face in the future. They must prepare a plan that would solve these issues. However, due to the non-existence of such plans, the country's debt has increased, deteriorating the economy. Ultimately, it is the public that must bear the burden. It is clear that a scam similar to the infamous bond issue that took place on the 27th of February 2015 had taken place. Therefore, the government must be transparent in this regard and keep the public informed. As a result of the former president's hunger for power that led to the 52-day political turmoil in our country, Sri Lanka was downgraded by international rating agencies. As a result, our country has to pay higher interest rates by approximately 3%. Under the present government, interest rates have normalized. However, interest rates are still higher than normal by about 1%. Because of the 52-day conspiracy, our country has approximately lost 6.4 billion rupees. We should recover those losses from those responsible.
Hello, good evening and welcome to the newsroom. And in the newsroom today with me is the senior retired banker, Mr. Rusripala Tenakon. Good evening to you, Mr. Rusripala.
Good evening, Faraz.
Now, we've heard what the Finance Minister, Mr. Mangala Samaravira, says about the higher interest rates.
Yes.
In this context, we note that in the last few days, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka issued a press release in which they said that they have raised $2.4 billion, that's 2,400 million US dollars in bonds between 5 years and 10 years. And they gave us the information in their press release that they had paid between 6.9% and 7.9% in US dollars. Now, isn't it true to say, Mr. Rusripala, that rather than, as Mr. Samaravira, the Minister of Finance, maintains, that they had to pay these high rates because of debt that they inherited from the previous regime, isn't it true that the trend for offering high interest rates by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka was actually created in February 2015, when Mr. Arjuna Mahendran, who was the governor then, decided to take up 10 times more money than what the central bank had advertised. They called for 1 billion rupees, and one company alone, Perpetual Treasuries Limited, along with the Bank of Ceylon, made bids worth or offered 15 billion rupees. Their aggregate was 15 billion rupees.
Yes.
Which is 1,500% more than the 1 billion that the central bank had advertised.
Yeah.
And therefore, when they took up, eventually, thanks to Mrs. Deepa Seniviratna, who objected and made a note, along with other officials who objected to take up the 20 billion, as the Governor Mahendran wanted, she made a note, and the central bank, at the insistence and the instructions of the Governor, Arjuna Mahendran, took just over 10 billion. Half of that went to perpetual treasuries.
Yes.
And here's the key critical thing. Because they changed the system, there was no average yield there. They took up, accepted the bids from perpetual at 12.5%. Now, I put it to you, Mr. Rusripala, that this was the trend. The trend for higher interest rates was done on the 27th of February 2015. And I put it to you, Mr. Rusripala, that that is the trend that we found ourselves in a few days ago when the central bank went to the international market to raise 2.4 billion, 2,400 million United States dollars at rates between 6.9% and 7.9%. I put it to you, isn't that the trend?
Yes. It is true that Mangala Samaraveera, the Minister of Finance, is trying to attribute some of the faults of this government to various things that he cannot justify and then substantiate. So this has been the trend. They have been repeatedly doing this over and over again. But going back to this interest issue,
yeah.
I think the adverse effect of the playing of the higher interest rates in this country commenced in no uncertain terms on the 27th of February 2015 with the infamous bond scam. How it happened
yes.
can be looked into, and this is something that we can scientifically and logically prove and establish, rather than attributing, various things that they cannot maintain.
Yes.
Now, what happened that day, Paras? The central bank called for 1 billion.
Yes.
After the closing of the offers on that day for the bond, the central bank public debts department decided to recommend accepting 2.6 billion at an average yield curve of 10.74.
That was the average of the offers for what the central bank was looking for.
They were looking at so many things, but one of the most significant things that they looked into at that time was, this was a 30-year bond. Whatever rate of interest that they agreed to offer or accept on that date would definitely continue for 30 more years. So this was one of the significant factors. So taking that into account, the central bank playing its role on behalf of the government to take money at the cheapest rate on the one hand, and also to maintain the interest levels of a long-term, long-running bond for over a period of 30 years at a manageable rate. They decided to accept the curve, average curve,
the average yield,
the long-term, long-standing curve to be at manageable levels.
Which is why they wanted to take
2.6
billion.
If it was taken, we would have maintained the rate at 10.74 tax, net of tax, for the next 30 years. What happened? Due to Arjuna Mahendran's intervention, just to support his son-in-law's company,
Yes.
to make him earn illegitimately from that bond issue, he instructed, directed the officials of the central bank, against their wishes, against their advice, to increase the amount from 2.6 billion to 10 billion.
But,
And at that 10 billion,
Yeah.
at that 10 billion, due to that, the curve went up to 12.5%. The average curve was 11.74.
and the principal beneficiary of that was obviously, as the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the issuance of bonds, was Perpetual Treasuries Limited. The bond report, so-called, popularly known as the bond report, very specifically, 2 Supreme Court judges and a retired Deputy Auditor General made their conclusion known in the report. It says that Arjuna Mahendran acted mala fide in the interest of Perpetual Treasuries Limited by giving away price-sensitive information. And this is the information with which Perpetual Treasuries Limited launched into a money-making vehicle. They made whirlwind profits based on that. And Mr. Rusiripala, I'm sorry to go on about this, but I'm not so sorry, because I'm talking with a passion for the people, because it's the people's money. The principal mistake or the principal liability was with none other than the people's monies through the Employees Provident Fund, the EPF. The same Presidential Commission looking into the bonds has actually put a figure in there, and the losses, the people's monies through the EPF was, wait for it, 8,500 million rupees, or over 8.5 billion rupees. The interest at today's current rates is around 2.5 million. If you add the penalty, it's 17 billion. It takes what the EPF could earn at 5 million rupees every day.
Yeah.
But Mr. Rusripala, the trend was set not because of some previous administration who certainly had their own faults, but why doesn't the Minister of Finance admit that the trend was set by none other than by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, by offering high rates for no earthly purpose other than to make profits for themselves?
Now, to accommodate his son-in-law's company to make undue profits and to make him obtain 5 billion out of the 10 that was decided at a higher rate of interest, it is a continuing adverse effect to which the country is paying up to date.
Mr. Ruspa, before we hand it back to Joel on the main news, can I just ask you this? Mr. Sumandiran said during the debate that the information in the budget was all false. Surely the done thing would have been for Mr. Sumandiran to exercise his displeasure and to prove that what he said was not mere theatrics,
Yes.
but that he really believed in what he said by voting against the budget.
I thought he brought in a red herring to mislead the people that they are also going to vote against the budget. It was just a red herring like many other things that he did.
The sad part, isn't it, Mr. Rusripala, that the people, including the mastermind behind the bond scam and costing the people and the country so much of money, and the higher rates that we are now paying on the international markets in dollars, the sad part is that some of these people are still ruling or governing this country.
Yes, indeed. That is the saddest part, and the whole country is expiating for their sins.
And that's it from Mr. Rusripala and myself.